Hi, I'm Gene McLoughlin. Welcome to Let's Talk About. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that very many of us see every day, don't pay too much attention to, and that's trees. And to help us work through this, our guest is Gary Lovallo, who is the Township Forestation Officer and the Conservation Officer.
That's right, Gene.
Gary, welcome to the show, and if we can start off, what is your background? How'd you get to where you are now?
Well, it started when I got a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree from Rutgers University in the field of forestry. Became a certified tree expert in 1985, a certified forester in 96 by the Society of American Foresters. I'm a certified arborist, and now I'm an approved forester by the state of New Jersey. So I have those four certifications for my background.
Okay, can you help us out for a minute? What does a conservation officer do, and does it differ from a forestation officer?
Yeah,
or a forester?
The forester conservation officer in terms of Old Bridge is one and the same.
Okay.
The conservation officer just gives a little more authority to deal with other issues, nuisance trees and things like that. But the forester in Old Bridge's respect is to review site plans for planning and zoning boards to make sure that the tree removal part of the plan complies with the ordinance and that the developer is not removing a lot of trees. And that we will review the plans to make sure that any tree that can be saved, that's worthy to be saved, is retained on the site. And also reviewing permits, tree removal permits, and working with the residents if they have questions. I have a tree in my yard that's it's browning leaves. We'll go out. We'll help the residents with problems and issues they may have.
Yeah, I never thought of you getting involved with planning and zoning in that regard, but I can see where you would. You know, it makes perfect sense. What is an arborist? I've heard that term for many years. What is it? What's an
arborist is a person who's trained in the field of arboriculture, not to repeat a term, but it is dealing with one tree as an individual, where a forester deals with a unit as a whole.
Okay.
So decisions made from a forester is on a community-wide basis, where a decision for an arborist is based on a single tree.
Okay. Okay, speaking of trees, I noticed that we here in this township have something called a Shade Tree Commission.
Right.
What is the Shade Tree Commission? What does it do? What's its mission?
The commission is set up and established and governed by state statute. The state sets up the Shade Tree Commission statute, which governs the designation of what the commission does. And the commission basically is responsible for all public-owned right-of-way trees. So that means trees along the street, basically within easements, are under the jurisdiction of the Shade Tree Commission.
Really?
That's the state statute. Then the enabling ordinance puts it beyond that, where the commission deals with planning and zoning issues, permit applications, and projects and programs that the commission has. So the state statute doesn't say you have to do any program. The commission does that on its own. And what Old Bridge has done is established several programs.
Right. The Shade Tree Commission, though, is a much more important function than you would think, state statute and all that type of thing.
Yes, absolutely. Because the commission deals with trees. And without someone who's an advocate of the trees, you'll be losing more than you replace. The state put in a program called No Net Loss, which was an idea that commissions try to follow, is that for every tree removed, you plant one, so that you don't lose many trees. Because many areas, especially urban areas, are barren of trees because of a policy that was remove the tree and don't worry about replacing it.
Right.
So the commission is important in that respect to make sure that the township stays covered and there's a lot of shade, noise buffer, air filtration, cooling, whole list of things.
That strikes a note because I pass many sites that are being stripped. It looks like a developer's in there to put in homes, and yet every tree is knocked down, every tree is gone. Is that in keeping with the statute, or is that violating the statute? Or
Well, yes and no. As a property owner, you have a right to build it within the law. Yeah. Once you comply with the law about building regulations, then you can. What the commission does is work with that developer for smart development. If he doesn't have to clear a certain part of land, he doesn't clear it. And that benefits the developer because he gets credits for that.
Oh, he does?
Yes.
Okay.
On certain applications where, like, instance, apartments, when you have a commercial piece of 3 acres, and generally a commercial application uses the entire 3 acres for building and parking lots.
Right.
So there's no opportunity to save trees there. And that's where the ordinance kicks in and says that over a certain amount of trees you remove, you have to replant a whole bunch more.
Okay, so that does put the burden back on the builder, back on the developer very
It does.
strongly.
Yeah, if they want to build smart, they can. They can work with the commission to develop their site in a smart way.
Right.
But if they need to utilize the whole piece, then they contribute back to the township in terms of tree planting or monetary contribution, and then the commission takes that money and plants trees throughout the community.
That's interesting, Gary. I dare say not many residents even realize that, even realize the function of the commission or what you do.
Right.
One question: what is a shade tree? How do you define a shade tree?
Typically, shade trees are defined as street trees. If you have a tree in the street that's shading the street, that's called a shade tree. So they're kind of interchangeable. But shade tree, for the definition, is a shade tree is any tree that provides shade. But for our purposes, it's for trees along the street.
Any specific size, height?
Yeah, we try to break it up where on our website we have replacement trees that are approved by the commission. We have shade trees, ornamentals, evergreens, and shrubs. So a shade tree is primarily trees 30, 40 feet taller that are large, can be large mature trees. Ornamental trees are those 25, 20 feet or less that you can plant on your front lawn. And then, of course, the evergreens and shrubs.
Are shade trees one species of tree more than another, or does any species qualify, or could any species qualify as a shade tree?
Just about anything can qualify as a shade tree. For our purposes, larger trees are under the shade tree category because we like to separate that as shade trees are street trees that are larger and will actually canopy the street later on. You know, when you go up to communities in North Jersey, you'll drive down the street.
Oh, definitely, that's a good
boulevard,
point,
and you'll see complete canopy cover. That's the goal of most communities.
Where would we see shade trees here in the township, for instance? 516, Throckmorton, Morristown Road, Chester.
Well, you can see
Cheesequake.
we just replanted Throckmorton Lane. First half of Throckmorton Lane with about 112 trees.
Really?
And because years and years of removing people, changing ownerships, moving in, removing trees, we wanted to revegetate that corridor. You know, Throckmorton Lane is a main thoroughfare from the Saywood South section.
Right.
So we thought that was an ideal street to beautify.
Okay, when you do that, do you have to get any kind of permission from the resident to do that in front of their house?
Well, the statute, as we mentioned before, gives us exclusive authority over those easements. But we don't like to give a tree to a resident who really doesn't want it. We take the opportunity to educate the residents and tell them the benefits of these trees and what it's going to do to their property. Not only increase property values, but shade. When they park their car in the street, it's going to shade the car. Some residents just don't want them.
Really?
Yeah.
Is shade the biggest benefit, though? Shade the car, whatever? Are there any other benefits to having a tree?
Tremendous benefits. I mean, the list goes on with that. And most everybody does understand the contribution of trees. I mean, not only number one is the oxygen it produces to the area. The number two is the cooling. You can walk from a sunny area to the shade and get 20 degrees cooler just by being under the tree. You know, and a lot of benefits go with that. You know, it filters dust from the particulates from the air, noise, buffers noise, provides habitat for wildlife. The list goes on and on. Plus products, when the tree is larger, mature, very diverse products you can get from trees.
What about if people reject a tree? Why do they reject it? What do they tell you? We don't want it because...
Some of the answers we've gotten from rejections were, get out of here. Or to more sociable people where I just had a tree removed. It cost me a lot of money. I don't want another one. I don't want to rake leaves.
Good point.
And the other complaint is roots ripped up my sidewalk. So what we've done is, utilizing the Shade Tree Commission's expertise, we designated certain trees for certain areas. So if the planting strip is narrow, we plant a very small tree there so that it doesn't reach the utility wires overhead and won't expand past the area its end, keep the roots, a deep-rooted tree to keep it from disrupting sidewalks. So we're trying to put, the old saying is, right tree, right place, and that's what we subscribe to.
And you try to minimize the disruption to the homeowner, obviously, so they don't have to do too much raking or too much trimming.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know,
Because I can see that, frankly, being a point, particularly if you have an older homeowner who doesn't want to get out there and do a lot of chopping and cutting and pay to have it done on the other hand. But okay.
Our position is this: the benefits far outweigh any raking or leaf litter. You know, because if you don't have a tree, your neighbors have trees. Those leaves are coming to your property anyway.
Okay. When we were talking before and on the air, Gary, you mentioned the term urban forestation. What is urban forestation?
Well, the difference between rural or traditional forestry is, like we said before, about you dealing with the forestry as a whole. Urban forestry is dealing with the community as a whole. so that we design our plans. Like we have a community forestry management plan.
You do?
Yes, we do in Old Bridge. It was just reapproved in 2016, which defines how Old Bridge proceeds in canopy cover in the community and how we're going to get there. What are we going to do to reach that point? It's a 5-year plan.
Wow.
And as part of that, reforestation is in there. So that it takes the community and says, Old Bridge, defined by these borders, this is what we're going to do. We're going to plant certain trees here. Now, in association with the Community Forestry Management Plan, we have a tree planting plan, which we had contracted out by an engineering company and gave us a 10-year plan on where to plant, how many trees to plant, and how much it's going to cost us. So we have a well-defined plan for the next 5 to 10 years on how to cover the urban forest. So the urban forest is when you have a city like Newark, for instance, that has less than 15% canopy cover in that city. Heat island, extremely hot and open. Where you come to Old Bridge, that has far more greater canopy covers than that. You want to increase that canopy cover to what the state recommends, that you want to diversify your forest and have as much canopy covered as you can, because it adds a lot of things. You know, canopy cover is related to crime. It reduces crime.
Does it really?
Yes, it does. And many studies in cities show that clearly.
If you don't mind, how does it do that?
When you're driving home and you come home from work and you drive into an urban environment where there's no trees, you're still just as angry coming off the Jersey roads. You're just as angry when you get home and tempers flare.
Right.
But when you drive in a rural community like Old Bridge, for instance, and you go down a tree-lined street, all of a sudden you say, I am relaxed. Now you feel better. And the aggravation from driving from point A to point B is now relieved, and you're more relaxed. The shade, it reduces the temperature, and it actually shows it has reduced crime.
So you're in the psychology business as well, I take it.
No.
That's pretty good.
No, I won't take any credit for that.
Okay. Gary, one thing, you talk about all this work being done. Is this covered in the township's capital budget, or
No.
where's it put?
The Shade Tree Commission has what's called the Shade Tree Trust Fund.
Okay.
And right now that fund is completely sustained by developers who have cleared trees.
Okay.
And they cannot replant trees, so they contribute to the Shade Tree Trust for us to plant later on.
Wow.
That fund right now we're planting. We try to plant twice a year to use that fund up. We run into some issues with when we go to notify residents. Too many residents are refusing trees. We have to keep expanding the area, so it kind of delays our process. But right now we have over $500,000 in the trust account to plant trees throughout the community. It's a lot of money, and we have a lot of ambitious plans to get these trees planted.
Jeez, that's very good, Gary. Thank you for that information. Folks, we're talking with Gary Lovallo, who is the Township Conservation Officer, the Township Forestation Officer. We'll be right back in a moment to talk more about trees. Please stay with us.
Oh, look, a redhead.
Staring contest.
You still got it.
I know.
Come alive with the forest.
The dad was cute.
They were looking right at us.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to Let's Talk About. Today we're talking about trees, believe it or not, and we have the help of our forestation officer, our conservation officer, Gary Lovallo. And we're going to pick up where we left off. And Gary, if I may, homeowners. We're addressing homeowners. I'm going to go out to buy a tree. I want a tree. You're not going to give me one. I want to go to buy one. What do I look for? What do I buy? What's important to me?
Well, it's always great when people want to do that, for sure. They want to beautify their property.
I want to fix up my backyard.
Sure.
Yeah.
They recognize the fact that we need a tree, we need shade.
Yes, sir.
What my recommendation would be, always try to utilize a professional if you can, because there's a lot of factors involved.
Right.
Being a business owner for 35 years, I've seen a lot of mistakes that were made.
I bet.
And homeowners are the consequence of that, because they have a tree that's planted in the wrong place, and it grew too close to the house. Now they have to remove it. So the best thing I can say is consult a expert in the field, whether it's a certified tree expert. Well, now we're called licensed tree expert.
Really?
An arborist, a certified arborist, or a landscape professional that will look at your soil to say, well, you have this type of soil.
Oh, okay.
It's not. Is it wet? You open it. You dig the hole. Is there water in it? Is it clay? Is it sand? And when you find the type of soil condition you have, you do a soil test, and that will tell you, does your soil need anything before you put the tree in, and then end up 2 years it dies. So you do that soil test, and then you go with the recommendation of the professionals that this is the kind of tree that will grow here. You want a large tree, small tree, flowers, no fruit. What type of year does it flower? What color flowers you want? What about fall color? So all those questions you have. This is what I want. When I do that with customers, I just ask them, what are you looking for? What size? You have a fall color, you have a flower, you have a particular tree, and then we go down the list, and then we come down with the list as this tree will work here.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, that is very helpful, I think, to the average resident, not to go out on their own.
Right.
Not to just go to a nursery near Lowe's or
Don't want to discourage
Home
it.
Depot. No, I understand. That's a good point.
Because whatever you plant today, Gene,
Yeah.
shows up as a mistake 20 years later.
Oh, God, don't even say that. Yeah, but then that person's not around to worry about
That's
it.
right. That's what the whole thing is.
One thing you mentioned off the air is you talked about if a homeowner has trees on their property and they want to commercialize them in some way, they want to sell lumber or something. How does that work?
Well, the individual homeowner on a regular size lot with a single tree, you're kind of limited to whatever you can do. The tree companies are not going to take it for firewood. It's very expensive to do that work.
Yeah.
So you're limited with that respect. But if you have more than 5 acres of land,
Okay.
exclusive of your house, you qualify for farmland assessment. And as part of the farmland assessment, you have to have a woodland management plan. And the same thing that the community has,
Wow.
the community forest management plan, homeowners or farmers can have this plan which says, this is how you're going to grow your forest for a future sale. And that could be firewood sale, that could be pulpwood sale, depending on the type of trees you have.
Right.
It could be lumber sale, depending on how much acreage and the type of trees you have. So if you don't have a black walnut tree that's 30 inches around in your backyard, pretty much the smaller homeowner is not going to get much product out of his tree.
But generally speaking, when you pass somebody's home and they have a stack of firewood out for sale,
Yes.
That's something they've cut down in their backyard probably, right?
Most of the time, absolutely true.
And that's okay.
That's fine.
That's
Absolutely
okay.
great.
Gary, how are you handling all the open spaces in the township? And you made a point that open space does not necessarily mean no trees.
Right.
How do you handle it all? We have a lot of open spaces now in the township.
Yeah, the move was for the last decade or so to acquire as much property as possible through farmland preservation.
Right.
But the one thing that's lacking in farmland preservation is maintenance.
Yeah.
So you can buy all the land you want, but there's no maintenance. And that's just simply because there's not enough funding or money available to take care of it. There's been legislation that's been proposed by Ron Dancer, who says, well, if you're going to acquire open space or preserve that farm, you need to have funding attached to it to maintain it. So how do we handle it is pretty much on an as-needed basis.
Okay.
If there is a tree that is in danger of falling onto a residential property, the township will address it, take a look, make a decision on it, and then if it needs to be removed, a contractor will come in and remove it. So the open space it's kind of more of a liability for the town in certain respects. It's great to preserve the land,
Right.
but Old Bridge that owns it now has to manage at least the perimeter of it.
Yes, sir.
So it needs to increase a little more.
Yeah, and I suspect Cottrell Farm would fall under that heading, huh?
Great example.
Yeah.
Gene. That's great because I want to talk about that, which is good.
Okay.
The Cottrell Farm is kind of a unique situation because you have a lot of input from not only the Shade Tree Commission input, the Environmental Commission,
Yes,
the
sir.
Historical Commission because of that farm itself,
Right.
Parks and Rec, Department of Public Works, and the township is looking to do great things with that.
Oh, yeah. A lot of big plans.
Yeah, a lot of big plans. We want to involve the community to at least get some input. We want to have a nature trail through there. We want to have an arboretum. We want to have a memorial park so that people who want to plant a tree to memorialize for someone,
Yeah, great
they
idea.
can plant a tree there with a little plaque, a gazebo, a little walkway. when we have our ordinance says for you to remove a tree, certain size, certain amount, you replace one. And people say, I don't want one here. Where can I plant one? Well, we've planted them at Lawrence Harbor Park. We planted them at Memorial Parkway. We planted them in some parks. But if we were able to say, well, how about planting a tree over the Cottrell Farms? Great. I think that's a great idea to do that.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, so I think the plans for Cottrell are moving forward. Nothing's been finalized, but it looks real good.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. That's a great piece of property. Okay, Gary, let's shift gears if we may. Where there are trees, there are probably natural pests or invasive species that try to harm these trees. What do we have going now in that area?
Well, one of the biggest things, and go to our website. You can get on our website from the Old Bridge website and just click shade tree.
Yes, sir.
Emerald ash borer, known as EAB. It's a invasive pest that was introduced and was found in Monroe a year or two ago, and Rutgers University predicts that when EAB is located in your area, that every ash tree will be dead in that area within 5 years. So you basically have 5 years before all the ash trees in that area are dead.
Really?
The emerald ash borer is so devastating because it affects healthy trees as well as stress trees. There are millions of trees out there that survive insects and pests every day because they are healthy. Insects and diseases cannot attack healthy trees, but the emerald ash borer, it doesn't matter.
Focuses on ash trees.
Ash trees only. It will, I think there are alternate hosts. I'm not really sure what they are, but it does attack ash trees exclusively all across the species range because there's numerous varieties of ash trees.
Yeah.
It gets them all. We'll attack them, and in a few years, the trees are dead.
How do you combat it? Once you discover it's on a piece of land or in a different area, how do you combat it? What do you do?
Unlike other pests of the past, like Asian longhorn beetle.
Yes, sir.
That was a big beetle.
I remember that.
Yep,
Yeah.
slow moving. And the state and APHIS and Department of Ag all got together and removed every host tree within a certain area. And basically in the Woodbridge, Union County area, 20,000 trees were removed. And that pest was considered eradicated, which is good. But EAB, not possible to eradicate. So how do you deal with it? It's remove the host, but the pest is still going to be there. You can treat certain trees. If you have an ash tree that is valuable to you and in good health right now, you can treat it with an insecticide which is systemic. An insecticide never touches the ground or the air. It goes directly into the tree and treats it. The insect goes there, takes a bite, dies.
Well, but it seems to me what you're saying is once you discover that this invasive species is present, you're already on your way to losing the battle.
Yes, because it starts from the top, works its way down. By the time you notice it, it's too late.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
It is. It is.
Really
The state has taken proactive approach. The state is going through their state parks right now, proactively removing ash trees to prevent and to make the area safe.
Are there any other species around this area that are as virulent as the borer?
Well, most people know not the Dutch elm disease, that's coming later, but the chestnut blight. American chestnut was the largest tree on the East Coast. It was the redwoods of the East. And it was 70% of the East Coast was forested with chestnuts. And the blight came over from overseas, killed every one of them. That's still not dealt with. It's still growing.
So this is chestnut trees now?
Chestnut trees.
Wow.
American chestnuts.
They really specialize, these insects, huh?
Oh, yes, they do. And so that was a disease that hit the whole blight. And then you have Dutch elm disease, which affected all the elm trees with the vascular obstruction. So those are the two prevalent ones. There's a few out there, but I think we've said enough.
Oh, Gary, one thing that I should talk to you about is something that's been prevalent lately at the council meeting, and it's also been in the newspapers. And that, I wouldn't believe it was here in this area, but bamboo trees. Bamboo. What's going on with bamboo?
Bamboo, as most people know who have it in their yard or don't have it in the yard, their neighbor has it, now they have it in the yard. The invasives, I don't want to talk about bamboo specifically, but all invasives.
Right. Is bamboo considered an invasive?
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
Really?
You just can't control it. When it's planted in an area, it just spreads, and that's its nature. It runs on rhizomes, which sends out a root, and then another sprout comes up. The several issues have come to the council's attention about bamboo from the neighboring property and how it's a maintenance issue for that person. So what council has asked me, and also other towns have already done, is introduce invasive ordinances, which would prevent the future planting of any tree that can encroach onto a neighbor who doesn't want it without installing protective barriers. Like bamboo, for instance, you mentioned. Bamboo needs to be containerized. It has to be with a wall that's probably 3 feet deep, 6 inches across, in a container to keep it from spreading. It is almost unstoppable. And people who have it adjacent to the yards are constantly out there pulling them out and trying to keep them. It's a never-ending job of doing that. So the invasive ordinance is to prevent that from happening, not only bamboo, but other plants from getting a foothold in the area and then taking over the area. Because invasives are introduced, not native, and will take over an area.
Yeah, I was going to say they're hardly considered indigenous to this area, bamboo, huh?
No.
Okay, that's a good point. Thank you, Gary. Gary, before we go, I think there's one thing we'd be remiss if we did not cover. And you do a lot of good work here. You were talking off the air. You have a scholarship program. You have a poster contest. Tell us a little bit about this, would you please?
Sure. That's great. The scholarship program we started, the Shade Tree Commission, was the brainchild of Dave Carbone, one of our commissioners. And all the commissioners contributed when Dave brought that to the table. And it's offered to all high school students, seniors, to come up with a program or a plan that's used by the commission. We thought that having a typical essay was kind of worn out.
Yes, sir.
So we said, let's have the students, and there are some extremely bright students out there, that let's utilize their gift.
Okay.
So we said, let's come up with a program that we can use, the Shade Tree Commission can use to sell or to teach homeowners about the benefits of accepting street trees.
Great
And
idea.
the scholarships came in. There was 5 of them. They were all well done. It was final 2 was very hard to pick, and we picked a winner who received a $1,000 scholarship for his future college career.
That's not too bad. Do these young people who submit these plans, are they from any specific major at the school?
Not that we're aware of. We didn't require them to be a science major or anything
That's
like
what I
that.
mean, yeah.
No, and it was open to anybody to do that. Okay. And then at the elementary level, we have poster contests.
Yeah, you mentioned that too. What does that consist of?
That is, we go to the principal of the school, and the principal gives us to the teacher who is in charge of biology or the environment. Mm-hmm. And they'll tell us the class to use, and then we'll give them a theme. What are the benefits of trees? And the posters we get from that entire block of grade. Gene, if you could see it, it's just 100 posters of all the kids, and you could see how these kids really put their hearts into it.
And how they really think.
How they really think is right.
Yeah.
And some was eye-opening,
yeah.
And some was typical, but the winner got 5 trees planted at their school in their name.
That's fantastic. That is really well done. Do you have any other programs like this, any other educational programs? I mean, you're giving us an education today just sitting here,
Sure.
I'll tell you that. Any programs other than these that you mentioned that you're involved in?
We participate. We have a booth at Old Bridge Day and Saltwater Day.
Okay.
We have our material we hand out, is typical, and then we hand out seedlings. And the other thing we have is a form that says request a tree.
Do you really?
Yes, anyone in the township can request a free tree from the township. And that's basically planted on the easement. We're not going to put it in your backyard, on your front yard, but we're going to put it in the shade tree easement.
And that's on the website?
That's on the website.
Well.
Yes.
I'll have to direct people to that.
Yeah.
Okay, Gary, last word. Any message you want to leave with people? As a forester, as a professional arborist, what would you like to say to the residents?
Well, always consider the environment. You know, I don't have a specific message that's going to be a one-liner that's going to be written as a quote for 20 years from now, but it's just consider the environment when you deal with trees. Consult a professional before deciding to remove a tree. There's a lot of options. After Hurricane Sandy, people said, I'm scared of my tree. I want these trees removed. Yeah. And we try to educate them in saying, pruning trees.
Right.
Gene, it shows the FEMA showed that the majority of trees that were damaged were unmaintained trees.
Really?
And that the trees that have been pruned over and over again were the trees that survived Hurricane Sandy. So my point is maintain your trees and consider the environment before just deciding to remove them.
Okay, well, Gary, I want to thank you for coming in today. Folks, I think we've all gotten a tremendous education from Gary Lovallo today. Again, he's a conservation officer for the township, forestation officer for the township. A lot of good points, Gary. I want to thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
It was great
Jim.
having you.
My pleasure.
And folks, I want to thank you for watching. This is Let's Talk About for this time. I'm Gene McLoughlin, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.